In 2024, I let imposter syndrome just take over, preventing me from reaching any of the goals that I set out to achieve. I didn't write any music. I convinced myself that my work just wasn't good enough. I told myself that I didn't have any time, but I realized that the problem wasn't with my goals themselves, but rather the lack of structure I had in place to actually achieve them. If you saw my last video of 2024, that was all about me coming to terms with that procrastination, with the imposter syndrome. And I told myself that 2025 was gonna be different. I was gonna focus on writing music for clients and myself. So to start fresh, on New Year's Eve, I actually went live and I, in real time, went through step by step the system that I use to not just set goals, but to actually stick with them. So today I wanna walk you through the core foundation of that goal setting system I have in place. So even when imposter syndrome is inevitably gonna show back up, the New Year resolution motivation fades away, this system is gonna keep me on track to actually achieve my goals of writing more music and landing those composing gigs. But before we dive into the system, we need to understand why most New Year's resolutions don't last. I always found that the problem with resolutions is that annual goals are just a bit too long-term and unrealistic to maintain, because where we are now is going to be very different from where we are a year from now. Back in 2019, Strava discovered that roughly 80% of people who set New Year's resolutions abandon them by the second week of January. And so we actually get what's called Quitter's Day, which takes place on the second Friday of the new year. And the thing is, people tend to be overambitious with their goals at the start of a new year. You know, people want to go to the gym every day. People want to stop snacking. In our case, maybe we want to land composing gigs. We start adding a ton of goals and they start piling up. And what happens once that initial motivation fades away? We end up with something like a Quitter's Day. So instead of making resolutions that are pretty broad and honestly likely to fail, I'm focused on creating a system that is rooted in a larger vision. And this is what Ali Abdaal calls the North Star concept. Basically, this is the guiding vision or your purpose that aligns your goals with your core values or your dreams. For me, my North Star is all about empowering composers to live their own fulfilling music career while also pursuing projects that just keep me inspired and creative. And without that North Star, your goals are going to feel a bit directionless and disconnected from what really matters to you. And so with that North Star as a foundation, I've actually built a system within my Notion template I call the Composer Odyssey Goals. Basically, this system is designed to take your biggest dreams, your long-term visions, and funnel them into clear, actionable steps that you can take every day. But before we can start planning any goals, start moving forward in the process, we have to look back. We have to take some time to reflect. Without any kind of reflection, it's easy to fall back into old habits. It's easy to repeat the same mistakes or set goals that just don't align with our priorities anymore. For me, I learned this the hard way last year. I started with big ambitions and I set these huge goals for myself, but honestly, halfway through the year, my priorities started to change. That's why the first step in the system is to just reflect on your previous year. Like, I could open up my 2024 review. I want to go through month by month and see what were the highlights, what were the low points, were there areas of creative and professional growth? Can I reflect back on different areas of my life, professional, creative, social, health, mindset? And if I were to write a letter to my future self a year from now, what would I say? What advice could I give? And honestly, in this step, I reviewed what worked, like doubling down on YouTube content that I genuinely wanted to create, or how important the music mastermind group that I'm part of is for my own professional and creative journey. But I also got to pick up on patterns that I would ultimately like to stop, which was how I neglected my composing. Now, once you've reflected, your next step is to see how your long-term visions relate to your North Star. You could kind of think of these like a vision board. Every long-term vision that you add here should ultimately bring you back to this North Star. For me, if my North Star was about empowering composers, but also pursuing projects that I genuinely enjoy. I want to make sure I have the time to make decisions that are best for me. I want to make sure I'm working on projects that are fulfilling. I want to feel confident in my ability to compose, to network as a musician in general. I want to feel financially free. I don't want to be burdened by money. I also want to protect authenticity as a composer, which is where I think I was lacking last year, and it really made me feel less than as a composer. And then this also relates, but empower composers to build fulfilling careers. That's that first part of my North Star. Basically, if my long-term visions are kind of like a compass, it pretty much all points in one direction. So without a clear vision, you honestly run the risk of just filling up your schedule with a ton of tasks that don't move the needle. They might keep you busy, they might feel important in the moment, but they're directionless. For example, I could spend months trying to perfect my website, but if that doesn't lead me in the direction of actually writing music or reaching out to potential collaborators, then it's not making any progress. It's honestly just a distraction. Now, long-term visions usually feel very inspiring, but they often can feel overwhelming as well. And that's because they aren't really that actionable. They're more rooted in the sense of someday and based on our dreams for the future. And that's why I really love this next part of the system that breaks down those long-term visions into actionable 90-day chunks that I call quarterly Odysseys. So looking at the next part of the system, we have the quarterly Odyssey tab. The one I created during the live stream was all about landing a scoring gig for a project that inspires me. I can see that it's quarter one. From now until the end of the first quarter, I have 12 weeks left. Basically, I want to take that goal for the quarter and break it down into 3 major sections. You'll see that we want to first define the goal for the quarter. What's the destination? And basically, this is where you also want to include any non-negotiables. What's the ultimate vision for this quarter? I want to have landed my first gig in over a year. How I'm going to do it, actively putting myself out there. The impact, I want to feel much more confident in my abilities. I want to make sure I'm taking on imposter syndrome compared to last year. And the purpose is ultimately how this relates to my long-term visions and my North Star, so feeling fulfilled. The project has to inspire. And then the second section is all about the path you're going to take. How can you map out the route? And this is where you set up those milestones. Reach out to 10 friends or acquaintances. I live in New York, so I also have New York City friends that I could reach out to. If no one replies, can I start looking into short films, communities, YouTube channels that I genuinely enjoy? This is where you want to figure out the time frame of your next 3 months, those 12 weeks. Who can be your ally in this process? Who can you reach out to that can help you achieve this goal? And then can you also anticipate any potential problems coming up? If no one replies back or I don't get any leads, can I stick to a schedule to create natural organic content? Can I check in again? Maybe I reach out to somebody who doesn't have an answer for me in January, but come the beginning of March, they might have a project. And of course, what if the inevitable happens and imposter syndrome takes over again? Can I reread the letter I wrote to myself in my yearly reflection? Can I go through my long-term visions? Can I add more to it? Maybe I can even get motivation from friends and peers and different mentors. And then the last section is the routine. How are you going to actually execute the plan? And that's what's going to lead me to the next part of the system, but I just really love setting quarterly goals because compared to annual goals, these just feel a lot more flexible. They feel a lot more actionable. And I also feel like I get a quicker win in a 3-month span versus a year from now. Now, let's say you have your quarterly Odyssey goal all set, but what happens now? This is where a lot of people tend to fall off because at the start of the year, it's much easier to write down or plan what you want to do. You've got the big picture in mind, but if you're not taking the time to review your progress weekly or, break things down into daily actions, then you are more likely going to lose that initial momentum. Kind of like with those yearly reviews, every week I set aside time to reflect on what worked in the past week, what could use some improvement, and how I want to move forward for the next upcoming week. I go through goal alignment where I actively have to look at my long-term goals, my quarterly Odysseys. I don't let myself forget them. Then I want to make sure I reflect what are great things that happened, what were some challenges, and then I want to organize over the next 2 weeks. What would I like to have done? What are 3 outcomes that basically define a successful week? And the thing is, without these weekly check-ins, I have found it easy to waste time on things that feel urgent, but don't actually move the needle. And that's why on a daily level, I use my system to help me take 2 to 3 key actions a day that align with my weekly plan. And so for example, this is just today's daily focus page. It allows me to track any important tasks for the next week. I get to align my day. I get to organize. So what other tasks that are important should I schedule into my calendar? And then I also get to reflect. So what's the emotional / energy state that I'm feeling? And how do I want to plan for tomorrow? I really find that this approach helps me from feeling too overwhelmed, and it makes sure that I'm actually making incremental progress towards my goals. And then finally, we have what Ali Abdaal calls side quests. These are for the moments where inspiration strikes and you just want to set a goal for a passion project. It doesn't have to relate to your overarching North Star or your long-term visions. So for example, like one of them is I just want to play more video games. And it has nothing to do with my work or my music or creativity, but I tend to never give myself time to just step back and relax. And I know that there's a ton of games out there that I would absolutely love. So one of the side quests, and in, I believe, the daily focus, I wrote down that I just wanted to play some Horizon Zero Dawn. Yep. Play some more Horizon. So that fulfills a side quest. But if I wanted to create just another side quest, typically these are low priority. I might say that the year is 2025. The quarter honestly doesn't really matter. Therefore, I don't necessarily have an accomplished date. But for example, one thing that I started doing at the end of last year was creating a Logic Pro template, specifically using Musio instruments. So I might say create Logic template with Musio. Again, this isn't directly related to any of my main goals, but it gives me the space to have some fun, to still work towards something while also developing my own workflow. And then if I decide that the side quest is important to me and, I start realizing that it is part of maybe my North Star of helping other composers as well, then I could always turn it into a quarterly Odyssey, and there's a button for that. But what I like about side quests is that they give us the permission to step away from the main path without really derailing any of our progress. And without the flexibility or giving yourself the space to feel fun, like you're working towards something that you enjoy, then the last thing you want is to feel boxed in by the system. Now, I just really love this Composer Odyssey goal setting system because every component all works together. If you do your reflection, you'll be able to set long-term goals that align with your North Star. If you break down your visions into quarterly Odysseys, your dreams start to feel a little bit more manageable with an actual win in sight. And if you take the time to reflect weekly and take those daily actions, you'll create these small building blocks that can actually keep you accountable. So if you do like this goal setting system, it is part of my Maestromind Accelerator Notion template. And honestly, goal setting is just one aspect of it. This is supposed to be an entire accountability system that I created where you can plan upcoming projects and tasks, get practice composing prompts, track your sample libraries and new instruments that you find interesting, manage contacts for current or potential collaborations, and really a lot more. So if you are interested and you want to hold yourself accountable to the goals that you set on January 1st, then definitely pick up the Notion template. I'll leave a link in the description down below. And with Quitter's Day only being 4 days from the time of recording this video, hopefully you can approach it with something to actually celebrate for the new year. So I'll see you in the next video, and as always, happy composing.